SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Dear learners, I welcome you in this course Research and Publication Ethics. Today I will be discussing about the idea of publication ethics in terms of its definitions and importance in research practices. My name is Dr. Nirbhay Kumar Mishra. I am an assistant professor at GAD University Mathura. So before we move further, let's try to understand what we have discussed so far precisely in the last lecture. So we talked about the idea of scientific conduct. We analyzed research practices in terms of both scientific and ethical conduct. Further, we discussed ethics with respect to science and research. We tried to understand ethics in research by the case studies, especially analyzing some cases from medical ethics and pandemic ethics. Then we comprehended the role of ethical values in research. We developed our understanding to the idea of intellectual honesty and research integrity. In the end, we analyzed an ethical approval form as a case study to understand research ethics and scientific conduct in practice. So after this session, learners will come to know about the idea of publication ethics. They will understand the importance of approval and consent in publication process. Further, I will be analyzing two small case studies to make them understood about the publication misconduct. Further, I will be analyzing responsibilities in publication process, responsibilities of authors, editors, reviewers and publishers. In the end, we will try to understand the very important idea in the publication process that's called ethical retraction. So scholars and researchers will come to know about these all concepts and ideas from this lecture. So before we go further to understand the publication ethics, what it means ordinarily we have to understand. So publication ethics simply means maintaining ethical conduct in complete publication process. It starts with research approval and consent, approval from different research committees and regulatory authorities, and consent of each and every research participants. If they are writing research papers, then of course consent of all the authors and contributors. So we have to understand the seriousity of the research practice. You know, research, they create new knowledge, they disseminate new knowledge in the research community. So there is importance of this publication ethics precisely that all the research in different forms, whether a researcher is writing a paper, a book, or they're working for patents or developing any technology, new devices, or any piece of intellectual work, they have to maintain publication ethics, they have to maintain research integrity, and they have to respect intellectual honesty. And that's why we have to understand patents and copyrights are for to protect intellectual property rights. So let's try to understand the further. Research practices are based on academic trust. Let me analyze this idea of academic trust. Look, in a research community, when a researcher works on certain ideas, okay, so they use certain knowledge, okay, and they add something into this through their studies, okay, through using resources, and it turns in the end in terms of a new knowledge. So this new knowledge is transferred to the next community or the existing research community. They utilize this knowledge in order to produce new research theories, concepts and knowledge. So the trust is very important, because on this trust based there is knowledge creation, okay. So all researchers should maintain the trust in terms of maintaining research integrity and intellectual honesty. Okay, so research data in any form which is utilized in the research development should be original. All sources of research should be rightly cited. The data must not be falsified, fabricated, or plagiarized. Okay, we have discussed these all ideas of falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism in our earlier lectures, right? So research for publication is rightly processed through impartial editorial decisions, plagiarism checks, authorship rules, approvals, and consents, avoiding any conflicts of interest whatsoever. Okay, it may be in terms of financial resources, or it may be conflict amongst the authors or contributors of the research. We need to be clarify each and every conflict of interest before we submit our research. The research must go a proper review system, okay, fair review system, and it is, these all things is to ensure that publication process is fair process, and we have the right kind of publication following the publication ethics. So let's try to understand, why do researchers commit publication misconduct? That's a very important idea. Let me analyze this point. Why researchers and publishers commit publication misconduct? Why they don't maintain this research integrity, and why they don't respect intellectual honesty? Okay, it started with the rise of this culture, what we call publish or perish. Let's try to understand what is this culture all about. In last 1 or 2 decades, there's tremendous pressures on researchers for their job promotion. Even all the institutions, they work for their reputation in terms of publishing more and more. So there is a pressure on the researchers to publish. So this publish and perish culture, what it caused further, it gave opportunity to a different trend that's called pay and publish. Okay, so now publish or perish culture is well supported by the pay and publish. You can pay to the publishers, and publisher can give you publications without minding the publication ethics, without having the stringent rules, without having a fair review process. Okay, you just pay the money, they can give you publication within 48 hours, 72 hours so that you can maintain your job, you can cope up with your academic pressures. Okay, you can go with your promotion sort of thing. Now we have to understand, publish and perish culture gave rise to pay and perish culture. Okay, now we have to understand the third point, which is very important, the third idea which comes here. Okay, so that is that's important idea where, okay, so now the third aspects why researchers they commit publication misconduct, we have to understand it also supported somehow the predatory publishers. Predatory publishers are fake publishers who publishes bogus researches without having any quality in that. They are publishing only for money. So we have to understand 3 important factors. Okay, those who started this misconduct in research practices. First is publish or perish, that supported pay and publish culture, and it also supported predatory journals. Okay, so researchers, those who were ignorant, okay, innocent, they caught to these predatory publishers, and then it started all misconduct in research practices. So we have to understand these 3 unethical sort of trends, those who emerge in research community in terms of research practices: publish or perish, pay and publish, and predatory publish. So we will try to understand these all factors in the course of the further lecture. So now I will be analyzing 2 small case studies. Okay, so to make you understand about what kind of publication misconducts researchers usually commit. Okay, and they are very, they for them it's very easy to use technology and commit this misconduct. Okay, so let's take the first case study, that's about the data fabrication. Okay, and so this study, in this case study, is based on a novel surgical procedure that was complicated and had high animal mortality. Such research is usually performed on a large number of animals to account for animal death during the procedure. Moreover, at the end, the experimental groups have unequal numbers. However, in this specific study, what editors found, the animal numbers were uniform in all groups, and that was seemingly improbable and was an issue that the authors needed to account for. So, data fabrication is most of the committed misconduct by the researchers, because given the technological advancements, data fabrication is very easy. And second is image manipulation or image duplication. Also in the medical researchers, we find how researchers use the effect, contrast effect, color effect, light effect, and they use the chemicals also to manipulate with the image. So they also commit image manipulation in a kind of publication misconduct in research practices. Now, coming to second small case study, that was suspected duplicate publication. Duplicate publication is also kind of misconduct in research practice. So there was one research study submitted to a journal. Okay, editor found that this study has already been published in a Chinese journal. However, the author did not mention the study, and they did not tell to editor also about the study. So in this case study is about the duplicate publication, or no similarity, no differences found in two different studies. Okay, so we see these kind of misconducts take place in research practices because they don't mind, the publication ethics. So when I was analyzing these points here in the slide, causes of publication misconduct, so we have to understand the major factor. We have to understand there is lack of, or we have to say there is lack of research ethics. Okay, there's lack of research ethics in researchers. That's we have to understand. That's a very important factor. Okay, because of lack of research ethics, we can say, because of lack of research ethics only, and these three factors, publish and perish, okay, they go for pay and publish, and they are also caught by the predatory publishers. So now further in the lecture, we will try to understand the publication ethics in terms of the several responsibilities of authors, editors, reviewers, publishers. So we will try to analyze the authors and contributors' role in publication process, in maintaining publication ethics in detail. So first of all, we need to understand who is author. Okay, what is the authorship criteria? So anyone can be author who makes an intellectual contribution in the development of a research paper, book, or any patent. Okay, if you contribute with intellectual if you contribute with intellectual contribution, right, then you deserve to be author. Okay, so researchers can be as lead authors, okay, to develop original ideas. They can create some patents of any technological devices, and some researchers can be authors in supporting or corresponding roles to transform a research work into the successful publication. So authorship can be different types, like lead author, co-author, first author, and corresponding author. Let's try to understand the publication ethics in terms of the guidelines. Okay, so let's try to discuss how COPE defines about the authors and the contributors. Okay, COPE, as we understand, Committee on Publication Ethics, they have defined clearly who is author, what is a corresponding author, who is co-author, who is first author, and what is about the contributors' role, okay, in the research development. So according to the COPE guidelines, A researcher qualifies for the authorship if he or she has contributed to the manuscript in any of the following ways. A researcher can have significant contributions to conception or design of the research work, or any researcher who acquires, analyzes, or interprets of the data, okay, which is gathered or collected during the research work, or anybody who drafts, edits the work or revises it critically, and thus contributes, importantly, to develop this intellectual content as a research work, right? So, further, we have to understand one important point. When a research is developed, a paper, a book is written by a single author, then it's very easy. If somebody is sole author, then there is no conflict of interest occurs, okay, in terms of responsibility allocation. But in case there are multiple authors or research work is done by a research team, then of course there should be a clear-cut, responsibility mechanism, and in such cases it is necessary to decide the clear-cut roles of each contributors. Okay, so it becomes a case of collective responsibility in which each member has a clear-cut responsibility, well-defined responsibility in the research publication process. Okay, so all the team members must be accountable for all aspects of the work to ensure that questions related to the accuracy or integrity of any part of the work are appropriately investigated and resolved. Before the final approval published, each author should be able to identify which co-authors are responsible for which specific part of the research. Now, let's try to understand the, in the research community or the research practices, these are two very important ideas about the authorship criteria, corresponding author and the idea of first author. Let's try to understand who is corresponding author. So, the corresponding author is someone who takes the major responsibility in the research development, we can say. A researcher is someone who takes primary responsibility for communication with the journal during the manuscript submission. He takes responsibility, he answers, responds to all the peer reviewers, okay, and he accords with the whole publication process, and he also responds to the journal's administrative requirements, such as providing details of authorship, ethics committee approvals, okay, and he fills all the documentation related to clinical trials. He collects all the information when occurs any conflict of interest issues in the research development or in the time of submission. Even he declares all the conflict of interest if it is with any peer reviewer also. So we have to understand the corresponding author has got major responsibility in the research and publication, and he has got the serious responsibility also to maintain publication ethics in this process. Now, let's try to understand who is first author. So, first author is someone who performs bulk of primary works, okay, which shape the foundation of a manuscript or research work. Author listed other than first or corresponding may have different contributions. However, they do not qualify to be the co-authors, as they don't qualify for the criteria of corresponding author or the first author. Of course, their contribution can be of different type, and they can be listed as different authors, second author, third author, or okay. So, and we have to understand further that who can't be author. Okay, there are many other activities performed during the research development or writing research paper. Okay, like somebody supporting in terms of financial issues. Okay, or procuring funding. Okay, or somebody is generally supervising the research group, or may or taking any administrative support, or editing and drafting, or working for the language development, okay, enhancement. These these all people, those who contributes in the development of research, although their contributions should be and must be acknowledged at the appropriate places, but they cannot qualify as the authors. We have to understand this idea very clearly. Now, let's try to understand some unethical and unacceptable authorships. Right here we are trying to analyze 6 different types of authorship which are usually observed in the research practices, but they are unethical, they are illegal also in research practices. Let's start with the very first, that is gift authorship. Let's try to understand what is gift authorship. Gift authorship is, this case occurs when a researcher simply adds a name of someone as author, and he or she wants to gift that paper, right? Gift authorship. Maybe somebody who can influence his or her research, can be beneficial in further course of research. So simply, a researcher takes his or her name in the research by gifting the paper. Okay. So the second important authorship, which is also unethical, is known as ghost authorship. Ghost authorship, where somebody actually writes the paper, has a good contribution to the paper, okay, but his or her name is not listed in publication. This kind of ghost authorship we usually observe in more medical papers, where professional medical writers, they write papers for the medical professionals for their enhancement of a career or the enhancement of the company profile. Okay, and then guest authorship. Okay, that's also a very important idea. Guest authorship, when a researcher includes someone's name as an author, because somebody is a reputed, recognized person, a researcher in an area where somebody can influence the success of the publication. Okay, so they just include the person as a guest in the paper. Okay, now honorary, we can understand, we gift sometime to someone who has got a respect in the research community, or we want to honor somebody, serious person in the research community, and we include his or her name. That's known as honorary authorship idea. Now coming to the next idea, which is the surrogate. Okay, these all forms of authorship, they are unethical and unacceptable. We have to understand. Though we find these kind of practices in research development, but they are unethical practices. Okay, surrogate authorship, when a researcher develops a study which is not having any original data. Okay, the bogus study, these studies are mostly published in predatory journals. Okay, so surrogate is when researchers don't have any original idea of its own, okay, and they are publishing a research paper. Okay, now coming to this anonymous or pseudonymous authorship, we have to understand that here an important point in research development, that research practice is an accountable practice. Even writing research papers, books, we need to be very accountable, because we are going to transfer the knowledge to the next research community. So in this accountability, we must have the transparency in terms of authorship. So it's not that we can publish without transparency in maintaining in terms of listing the author's name. So any kind of anonymous or pseudonymous publication, fictitious publication, they are considered as unethical and illegal publications. Now further we move, what are the other responsibilities an author has to ensure in research and publication process? The most important is originality. Okay, so when the author submits a research, okay, so he or she has to provide a statement, okay, to the editor, okay, that the research is original and is not published earlier or not plagiarized in any form, okay, and all the research citations are properly done. So we have to understand that originality is one of the most important factors in terms of publication ethics, and author has to maintain the originality and novelty of his work. Secondly, author must keep a good record of the data. He or she should maintain data, okay, because data can be anytime utilized. All the research based data information are very important, okay. They can be of use to editors and reviewers even after publication. If there are some controversies and problems occur, then these information, this data is very beneficial. So authors should maintain a good record keeping, and he or she should maintain a good data file also, okay. Further, we have to understand that publication misconduct is mostly committed in the forms of fabrication, falsification, plagiarism, okay. So an author must be well informed to the rule of plagiarism, okay. What is plagiarism and what is self-plagiarism? We have discussed already in the earlier lectures, okay. So author must understand that he or she cannot use already published work. Even if or she goes to use the already published work, he or she is supposed to cite it clearly in the research, okay. And if somebody is using the other's work, then someone must make proper citation with proper method at appropriate place in the research paper or in any kind of research, okay. So further, authors must maintain honesty, objectivity and integrity. So author must avoid any kind of bias in research design, experimental methods, data collection, data analysis, data representation. In all research based communication, author has to maintain integrity, and he or she has to have the very clear objectivity and integrity in the whole research process. So it involves that author must be aware of falsification, fabrication and misrepresentation and selective reporting, because they are the unethical ways of developing a research. So author must avoid these FFP, falsification, fabrication, plagiarism in writing a research paper, in developing any piece of research, okay. Further, author has this responsibility to avoid any conflict of interest, okay. So author should disclose if there exists any conflict of interest amongst the authors or with any financial or funding authority. So author has to be very clear, okay. Even researchers should also avoid bias in peer review, because as a researcher, not only your author, you are also reviewer, you review others' paper, then you must avoid any kind of bias in that process, okay. So any kind of editorial decision, reviewer decision, personal decisions, or grant writing or grant approval and other aspects of research, in any kind of research aspect, we have to avoid conflict of interest and we have to avoid bias as a ethical researcher. And coming to openness, first we have to understand that research practice or till publication, if you're writing this paper, till publication, all the data information you are communicating with the editor must be confidential. It must not be disclosed to anyone until the publication done, okay. Further, let's move to understand the authors has got another important responsibility in terms of respecting intellectual property, okay. So it is the author's responsibility to honor patents, okay, and copyrights and other forms of intellectual property when privy to someone else's unpublished data research plans. As a reviewer, editor or a visitor to a lab or member of audience at a lecture, one should not use the privileged, okay, or confidential information or ideas, okay, for one's work without prior permission, since this is idea plagiarism. So what is idea plagiarism? That's a very important idea, okay. Look, a reviewer is reviewing a paper, editor is going through the paper, okay, and you may be supervisor of any research experiment or a patent has to be filed, okay. You go through, understand the whole paper process or patent, okay. So you are supposed to respect the intellectual property of a researcher, okay, scientist also, okay. So you're not going to use it, okay, or you are not going to plagiarize it in any way. That's very important, respect for intellectual property we have to understand. in the form of publication ethics and research practices. Let's go further to understand an important aspect of author's responsible conduct in terms of copyright agreement. That's very important. Okay, when your paper is accepted, okay, or any patent is accepted, then editor has this role to to take the copyright agreement done with the researcher or scholar. So this is a legal document, we have to understand, by which author assigns certain rights to publisher. Author should review the agreement carefully, and research content for such an agreement must be original. So here we have to understand two important points. First, author must read the contract of this copyright agreement very clearly, terms and conditions. He or she should understand clearly, and then researcher must ensure that whatever the research paper or any other piece of research work he or she is submitting must be original. Next point is about the disclosure. Okay, that's also important aspect in the research paper. In the end, we have to disclose. Okay, so author must follow the research integrity, and he or she must comply with the publishing rules that includes disclosures of contributions in terms of authorship, ethical approval, financial support, or conflict of interest. So in this disclosure, okay, that's a very important step in the research publication process. Here we have chance to even clarify our conflict of interest. We can write what kind of conflicts are there. We can disclose all the funding and financial resources, okay, if we are receiving for the research development, and we can also disclose all the authorship very clearly in terms of corresponding author, first author, second author, and if there occurs any conflict of interest with any research team, we can make certain disclosure clearly at this place. Further, we have to understand that if research development requires a lot of resources, we use many resources from the other scholars' work also. So in case of using the others' work, we must take consent from the researcher who has published the work, okay, because we use tables, data, images, okay, there are many things we use in the research development. So researchers are allowed to reuse the data in different forms like images, tables, graphs, or any piece of research content for the research development. However, if such data is under copyright, okay, then they need to take prior permission from publisher authors. Even if the data is not under copyright, such content is not needed. So such consent is not needed. However, a researcher must cite the original source at proper place. Okay, and then further, an author has to maintain confidentiality in research publication. Okay, that we have understood that the communication between the author and editor, reviewer and editor, okay, the communication highly confidential until the paper published, until the research work submitted and published open for public. We should not disclose any information to any other who is not concerned with the publication process, like editor or reviewers. Okay, so authors should follow general rules when communicating with external reviewers. Okay. Now, further, we have to understand the research publication as a responsible act. Okay, it's a accountable act, because it's not only in terms that we are doing for our promotions or job or fame, respect in the intellectual research community. Okay, we have to understand that research has a social side. Okay, it's a socially responsible act, because researchers, precisely researchers in medical care field, in social media, they have a direct impact to society. So any piece of research development, any piece of knowledge which is being created by researchers, it actually influences the social practices it influences the practices in medical sciences. Healthcare workers, they use those manuals. Doctors, they use the treatment method, clinical therapies. So we have to understand this research publication is a very responsible act. Okay, so we have to maintain the purpose of creating new knowledge not only one's professional advancement, but also includes responsibility of an author who transfers the knowledge to the society. Okay, in the end, to the author's responsible conduct, we have to understand public announcements of new results. Okay, so a research work under publication process remains confidential till its final publication. Authors should follow journal's rule for any kind of research communication. So here confidentiality is very key factor. Now, after discussing so long in detail about the authorship, contributorship, okay, and then about the ethics of author, responsibilities of author in research development and research publication, let's try to understand some important ethical conventions of publications. Okay, so the very first thing we have to understand, a researcher must not commit multiple submissions. Okay, it is unethical and illegal to submit the report of study to more than one journal at the same time. So multiple submission or duplicate submission is unethical practice. Second convention, all co-authors must agree to the request for the withdrawal of research paper, or for any consent and approval, all co-authors must agree. Okay, they must have this agreement. Okay, and that agreement must be very clear to the editor of the journal with which the study is under consideration. Okay, so author should inform the editor if they wish to withdraw their work from review, or if they choose not to respond to reviewer comments after receiving editor's communication asking for revisions. So they should not make the multiple publications. Okay, we have to understand that any publication committing plagiarism is also unethical. Okay, so what researchers do sometimes, they don't follow ethical convention. What they do something wrong is that they produce a big data. Okay, and they try to publish this research in terms of different pieces. Okay, and that's what we have discussed in earlier discussion. Okay, that's known as kind of salami slicing, we can understand. Okay, so salami slicing is like a big research work they have done, and they're cutting in terms of the need and time. They're producing, okay, they are making it called salami slicing. Okay, so salami slicing is unethical. Okay, so researchers, they produce a big data. Okay, and they try to publish small papers out of this big research data, and that's also unethical. We have to understand this is unethical as a research practice. Okay, so it is against the ethical convention, we have to understand. Further, we have to understand one important convention in terms of suggesting potential reviewers. Okay, when an author suggests potential reviewers, okay, first of all, he or she should not suggest any friend or any connection of acquaintance, because that is going to make the process biased. Okay, so author may have the more chances for that paper will be published. Okay, so author must maintain this ethics in terms of suggesting reviewers. Even if authors have any conflict to some reviewers, they can also declare this conflict at the same time. Okay, so it is unethical of acceptance. It is absolutely unethical to suggest fictitious names as reviewers with self-directed email addresses so that the authors become reviewer as well. That's very unethical. Sometimes what researchers do, they give the different email IDs with different names. Actually, they belong to the both IDs. Okay, that's very unethical practice in the research publication against the ethical convention. Okay, so We have to understand, suppose a researcher publishes a paper and later on he or she realizes the point that there are some errors in the published work. Okay, so anybody can realize, a reviewer can realize, or author can realize, okay, and then they can let the editor know about these errors. Okay, so when the work is published, okay, sometimes what happens, it may be the honest error, okay, that an author did not, you know, realize. Okay, so what they can do, they must inform to reviewer or editor. Okay, so if it was a case of inadvertent error in data collection or analysis or interpretation of data, all authors, if it was a multi-authored publication, should be informed, and the error and its nature and implications on the final inferences should be reported to the editor of the journal. Authors may publish in consultation with the editor either an erratum or a new paper to rectify the previous error in the same journal. So these are the process, you know, authors can do to, you know, correct the errors, okay, whether it's honest error. Now, coming to the important part of withdrawal or retraction of a published paper, okay, author or editor or a reader may notice, suspect an act of deliberate misconduct. Okay, that's serious conduct. Okay, we have to, you know, make this difference between the honest error and deliberate misconduct, such as a researcher has falsified with the data, fabricated with the data, or committed any sort of plagiarism, okay, on the part of authors in a published paper. Okay, this needs to be carefully investigated, especially by the journal, to establish the alleged misconduct. Okay, if the misconduct is established, all authors need to be informed about the same, and either the authors may decide to withdraw the paper, or the journal may publish with due reasons a retraction notice for the earlier published paper. Such acts of misconduct, when established, are to be dealt by the responsible institutions following the regulations, laws in force at the time. Now let's go ahead to understand, you know, how we can avoid, you know, publication misconduct, and how can we, you know, follow publication ethics. Okay, let's try to understand the new trend in publishing. Okay, publishing ethically and safely. Okay, here I'm going to talk about the idea of preprint archives. That's really a good development in research practice, because preprint archives publish the manuscript as submitted by authors subject to some journal conditions, but without any prior peer review process. Okay, so what preprint archives, you know, some journals like SAGE, you know, they give this opportunity to researchers. They can upload their paper on journal websites. Okay, and then this paper is publicly open for review of the all interested readers of that area. They give very good comments. Okay, and they also add some important ideas to that, you know, research which has been, you know, kept on the page. So what it does, okay, this provides a free internal open access, okay, to the original research output. Okay, preprint archives do not generally publish review articles, that we have to understand, but preprint archives facilitate post-publication peer review, since any reader has the possibility of posting comments on the published material. So it's a really wonderful practice, okay, these days, and researchers and authors have got this opportunity so to, you know, make certain changes, corrections in order to develop the research. So research is going to be very effective, and it increases the fair chances for the publication of the research. Now, coming to peer-reviewed scholarly journals. Okay, when you are targeting publication, so first of all, you should choose a scholarly journals. Okay, so always select a right journal with following precautions. Okay, the journal should be proper in terms of it has a credibility and the journal is reputed, okay, journal is published regularly and punctually and should have well defined peer review process, and they have very good, stringent editorial policies, okay. So publication in journals published by established academies, learned societies, universities must be preferred, okay, and they are to be preferred over those published by commercial organizations, those who are publishing papers for money only, right. So authors must avoid predatory or bogus journals, okay, which charge a fee to rapidly publish anything without peer review. Sometimes they mention on journal website that they can publish a paper within 48 hours. We must avoid the journals. They are typically predatory journals, okay. Now let's try to understand, okay, the responsibility of editors, okay. So we have to understand what are the responsibilities of these editors, okay, chief editors, sub editors, editorial board. They are a very responsible job. A chief editor has to align with all the editors. Suppose a journal is specific in one research area, or a journal may be multidisciplinary, but we should target the specific research journals, okay, and their chief editor has to allocate the responsibilities to the sub editors and editorial board, okay, in order to facilitate the publication process with stringent editorial policies and rules. So we need to understand what are the general responsibilities of editors. So Calipo, in one study, he talks about the important roles of editors, okay. So the following are the important roles that an editor has to manage. So first of all, editor of a journal must be academically competent person, okay. It's not that anybody becomes editor to any journal, okay. So editor has to be very competent, a very knowledgeable person in the area, so that he can choose right reviewers for the publication process. All submissions should be submitted by the editor to check for plagiarism, quality of illustration materials, okay. Editors should promptly select peer reviewers with due care about their expertise and experience in the field. Editors need to ensure timely receipt of comments on the manuscript from reviewers, okay, and editor has to ensure appropriate copy editing of the manuscript to take care of linguistic issues and formatting of references, figures, tables, etc., and to get timely proof corrections and subsequent publication. So editor has got huge responsibility in the research and publication process, we have to understand. So he or she has to be very competent person, and he or she must have a good experience in publication process also. So let's try to understand what are the responsibilities of reviewers in the publication process to maintain publication ethics, okay. So peer reviewers are supposed to maintain the following aspects in publication process to be fair to both editors and authors. A reviewer should accept the given responsibility only if he or she is adequately competent and knowledgeable in the field, and should follow the timeline provided by the journal for submitting comments. So once you become a reviewer, it's a responsibility that you must accept the paper only if you have this competency to review the paper, one, and two, that you must give the comments on the paper following the timeline, because researchers and authors are waiting for publication, okay. So any possibility of a conflict of interest should be immediately reported to the editor, okay. Reviewer finds any conflict in terms of the authorship criteria or in terms of any method, any data, what he acknowledges, he should report to the editor immediately. So reviewers should check for the originality in the questions addressed and some novelty in findings that permit some advances in understanding using valid methods, materials, experimental designs, etc. Let's quickly understand the responsibilities of publishers, okay. Publication of research, as we have discussed, is not only commercial process. It has, a serious social impact. So all the publishers must announce their schedule and frequency of publication, and they should maintain it. Okay, and publishers should not take recourse to artificially enhance the citation impact factor of journal. Publishers must not interfere in academic freedom of editors and editorial board in processing of the manuscript subject to publication. Now, further details of editorial board, ethical and publication policies of journal must be transparent and available for anyone to see. Author guidelines, information about any charges payable by authors should be clearly stated. Whenever possible, okay, publishers, okay, should waive the fee of the paper in case if author is not able to pay. Okay, they should waive the publication charges. Okay, so publishing of predatory or bogus journals which would rapidly publish anything or payment of a fee but without sensible peer review is absolutely unethical, and we have to avoid predatory publishers in this process. Now, ethics of retraction is a very important idea. Okay, in the end we have discussed editors, reviewers and publishers have these responsibilities to maintain ethical conduct in publication process. However, if they notice any misconduct, they should make an inquiry following the COPE guidelines. Depending upon the seriousness of the unethical misconduct, authors may publish an apology note or editors may publish expression of concern or retract the paper. In more serious cases, the editor is expected to inform the authors and the concerned host institution about the misconduct. So now let's try to summarize whatever we have discussed so far in this lecture. Okay, so we discussed about the idea of publication ethics in terms of its definition and importance in publication process. Okay, we analyzed case studies to understand what kind of misconducts are there in the research practices. We discussed about the authorship criteria. We understood clearly about the corresponding author, first author and the other contributions in research process. In the end, we tried to understand the responsibilities in publication process, responsibilities of authors, editors, reviewers and publishers. These are some references that I have used for the development of this lecture. Okay, scholars can go through these references. Okay, thank you very much.